25 plus. Title: No nanny lasted a week with the millionaire CEO's twins, until she showed up and did what no one ever did. The sun crept slowly over the glittering skyline of Manhattan, painting the clouds in shades of peach and gold. The world below stirred to life with honking taxis and steaming manholes, but in the penthouse suite of Dylan Stone, a name etched in Silicon Valley history, chaos had already been awake for hours. The untamed storm. 6-year-old Max hurled a pillow across the room, nearly toppling a $3,000 vase. Mila shrieked in protest, her tiny fists clutching a stuffed bunny missing an ear. Another nanny, this one barely out of college, stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes as milk dripped down her shirt from a tantrum gone rogue. "I can't. I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. I can't do this anymore." With that, she slammed the door behind her, becoming the 19th nanny to leave in the past 6 months. Dylan, who had been in a meeting with a Japanese investor on mute, exhaled. He didn't even argue. He couldn't. Part of him didn't blame them. His children weren't monsters, they were just lost. Motherless. Grieving. And he had no idea how to reach them. He sat on the edge of his bed that night, staring at a photo of his late wife, Eva, with laughter in her eyes and a baby bump under her sundress. She had died giving birth to the twins. Dylan never recovered. He buried his pain in work, in numbers, in success. But the children, they had no place to put theirs. A knock at the door. 3 days later, the agency sent someone new. Dylan barely glanced up from his iPad when she walked in. She wasn't dressed like the others. No designer heels, no clipboard. Just a plain gray cardigan, scuffed shoes, and a kind smile. Her resume was thin, her experience mostly volunteer-based. Dylan sighed. "You're not exactly what I had in mind." "I know," Clara said, clutching her old handbag. "But I am what they might need." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "What makes you so sure?" She smiled softly. "Because I don't see problem children. I see pain. And pain needs to be seen before it can heal." It wasn't logic. It wasn't impressive credentials. But something in her voice, something in her eyes, made Dylan pause. He nodded. "Fine. 1 week. Cracking the code." The first morning was the usual chaos. Max refused to get out of bed. Mila hid under the kitchen island. Clara didn't scold. She sat quietly in the hallway, humming a lullaby from her childhood. Within 20 minutes, Mila peeked out. Max followed, cautiously curious. Instead of forcing them into routines, Clara invited them to help her bake muffins, chocolate chip, of course. She didn't force meals or fight bedtime. She simply observed, adapted, and connected. She noticed Max liked building things. So she brought him Lego sets and praised every creation like it was a masterpiece. Mila loved art, but hated being corrected, so Clara gave her a wall covered in brown paper and called it, the Mila Museum. A silent transformation. By the 5th day, Dylan found himself canceling meetings just to witness the shift he couldn't explain. Where once the twins screamed through the hallways, now laughter echoed. Max, who never hugged anyone, gave Clara his blanket when she sneezed. Mila, who barely spoke at dinner, now told stories about invisible unicorns and insisted Dylan listen. He started coming home earlier. One evening, he walked in to see Clara teaching the twins how to dance in the living room. Max stood on her feet, giggling, while Mila spun like a flower. For the first time in years, Dylan laughed. Revelations on the rooftop. One night, after tucking the kids in, Dylan found Clara on the rooftop under fairy lights she had hung herself. The air was crisp. She sat with a photo in her hands, unaware he was there. When she noticed him, she didn't hide it. "My brother," she whispered. He had cerebral palsy. We bounced from foster homes until we found one that stuck. I cared for him until he passed. He never spoke a word, but he taught me how to listen. Dylan stood silently beside her. I guess. I've always believed that children don't act out because they're bad. They act out because something inside them is unheard. He swallowed hard. His own silence echoed in his chest. The grief he never gave his kids space to feel, the void he tried to fill with gifts and gadgets. Healing, one moment at a time. The next morning, Dylan surprised everyone. He made pancakes. Clara smiled but didn't say anything. Max stared at the lumpy stack and said, "They look weird." Mila whispered, "But they smell like magic." Weekends turned into family rituals. Central Park picnics. Baking disasters. Library visits where Max would pick books and Clara would make silly voices for every character. Mila painted Dylan's face with glitter once, and he wore it to a conference call by accident. No one dared comment. One day, Dylan found Clara asleep on the couch, Max curled up against her chest. He took a picture quietly and stared at it for hours later that night. This was home. When love is spoken without words. Months passed. Winter arrived. The twins decorated the penthouse with paper snowflakes. Dylan started turning down international meetings. He even took a few cooking classes, to make real pancakes, he joked. Clara never asked for anything. She never crossed boundaries. But Mila once told her teacher, "Mama Clara says love is when you feel safe enough to be silly." The teacher asked, "Is Clara your new mommy?" Mila had said, "She's not new. She's just, ours." A new beginning. On Christmas morning, Dylan had planned something special. The tree sparkled with silver ornaments. A small velvet box sat beneath it, not with a ring, but a charm necklace, delicate, golden, shaped like a butterfly. Inside the box was a note. "You didn't just change their lives. You changed mine. You brought us back to love." Clara's hands trembled as she read it. Dylan stood behind her, heart pounding. "We'd like you to stay. Not as the nanny. As family." Clara turned, eyes brimming. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Max and Mila jumped onto the couch, screaming, "Yes." And that day, the penthouse wasn't just filled with gifts. It was filled with grace. The penthouse no longer looked like a showroom. Finger-painted frames lined the walls. There were worn spots on the couch from movie nights. A piano sat near the balcony, where Max practiced. Mila's ballet slippers were always somewhere under the table. Clara taught parenting classes part-time now, using stories, not lectures, to help others connect with children. Dylan became an advocate for work-life balance, surprising everyone in the business world. When asked what changed him, he always said, "A woman with no fancy resume and a tattered handbag, but the biggest heart I've ever known." And every night, when Clara tucked in Max and Mila, they whispered, "You nine." And she would always reply, "I always will." Expanded lesson. You don't need to be extraordinary to make an extraordinary difference. What children, and adults, truly need is to be seen, heard, and loved. Clara didn't bring discipline. She brought dignity. She didn't bring control. She brought connection. And in doing so, she healed a broken home not with power, but with presence. Love, in its quietest form, can echo the loudest through the halls of even the loneliest hearts.